On my 19th birthday, I went to see the remake of Disney's Aladdin. And I'm not normally a fan of remakes. Like, I always think the original is the best. But I was actually really surprised when I saw this one. Like, it was great. It was funny, it was nostalgic, and the music, well, it was brilliant. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this story. Aladdin is a street urchin who stumbles across this magical lamp. And after he rubs this lamp, he meets a genie. And the genie is able to grant him 3 wishes. The first wish is wanting to be a prince. His second wish is needing to be saved. And thirdly, he wishes for freedom. Wanting to be a prince, needing to be saved, and wishing for freedom. Now, Disney is really, really good at making us empathize with its protagonists. And we feel sorry for Aladdin when we first meet him. The Aladdin that we are introduced to is mocked by a world that doesn't believe he's worth anything at all. Even the law of the land forbids a marriage between a commoner and a princess. The merchants see him as a crook, the noblemen see him as a dirt-poor thief, and in the eyes of the people around him, Aladdin is weak and insignificant because he relies on other people to survive. And so, he wishes to be a prince.
Aha! To make a prince.
Now, is that an official wish? Say the magic words.
Genie, I wish for you to make me a prince.
All right! Yo, yo, yo.
Part of the reason why Aladdin wants to be a prince is because he doesn't want to be seen as a scoundrel. He wants to be worthy of respect. But like all good stories, Aladdin also falls in love. Oh. He feels that a relationship with Princess Jasmine is going to give him lasting contentment, and this is what he chases for the rest of the movie. There are so many movies where the protagonist wants to be their version of a prince. Take Rocky, for instance. The only good Rocky movie, the original, obviously, has a really awesome training montage. The trumpets are going, he's doing that fast punching thing, and he's running up the steps of this art museum. And like in the movie, Rocky gets asked, "Why are you working so hard? Why are you doing all these things? You know, why do you want this?" And his answer is, "I want to go the distance. Then I'll know I'm not a bum." I mean, I totally get where he's coming from. I'm sure none of us want to be bums either. See, Rocky's version of being a prince is simply not being a bum. He's chasing his self-worth, right? That's what's driving him. That's why he's working so hard. That's why he's trying to get to the top. It's also why the remakes aren't as good. It's the same story again and again. Rocky has a deep need for fulfillment, and he has a deep need for rest. You see, Aladdin's wish to be a prince is actually a longing for rest. Aladdin and Rocky both place their self-worth in how other people see them. They can try all they want, and actually they do a pretty good job at making their dreams a reality. But it doesn't fulfill them. It doesn't satisfy. They're left wanting more. They're left feeling a bit restless. They want to stop working to prove their self-worth and find that good, sweet place of rest. We always tend to see ourselves through the lens of how other people see us. So during grade 12, for example, I saw myself as a bit weaker when I had to rely on other people for help. My year 12 chemistry teacher, Mr. Atkins, loved to make his classroom what he called a positive learning environment. I'm sure some of you are teachers like this too. But even though Mr. Atkins did his very best to make his classroom comfortable for us, I was always a bit scared to put my hand up and ask questions. I was scared of asking something obvious, scared of saying something silly, and well, I didn't really want to waste anyone's time. And in a similar way, I sometimes felt like I was a bit more enough when I didn't need other people's help. When I knew the answers to the chemistry questions, well, that's when I felt a bit more stable on my own 2 feet. I felt like I could do it on my own and that I deserved it. It's a message that we see all around us. Nike tells us to just do it. L'Oreal Paris says it's because you're worth it. And people all around us tell us that the sky is the limit. And like Aladdin, I saw that my self-sufficiency, my sense of self-worth, well, that depended on what others thought about me. How I looked in their eyes was most important, and when I looked impressive, that's when it was enough. But like Aladdin and Rocky, it didn't really matter how well or how badly I ended up doing. I still never really felt fulfilled. I was doing all this work to get things right. I was studying as best as I could and training as much as possible. But there was also another part of me working. Work that took place in here. Work beneath the work. Physically doing the work may make us want to sit down and rest, but it's this second kind of work that makes us weary and burdened all of the time. It's really hard to escape doing work nowadays. We live in an age where we have constant access to technology. It's always easy to be on our phones or on our computers, and working towards our self-worth is such an attractive goal. I don't know about you, but I always feel the pressure to add more things to the CV. Junior doctors are overworked for years. Business people always need to work on building their networks. Our whole society is filled with work, and there's hardly any room for good, proper rest. All of us have very different relationships to work. Some of us here study full-time. Some of us feel overworked and really need a break. Some of us might even have had a huge mid-year break and kind of want to work a bit harder this semester. But regardless of your relationship with work, what does good, proper rest feel like for you? Well, for me, it feels like KFC and Minecraft. I love KFC, and during Swapback, I often play this game with myself. I'll memorize a few things, and then I'll reward myself with KFC. And it works so well. I'll concentrate for an hour or so, and then go full sicko mode in my study, and then bam, off to KFC, in I go, order a Zinger Stacker box, and the one thought that goes through my mind as I'm eating it, and the work is done, is this is really good. Or when I play Minecraft. The other day, I was trying to find diamonds, and I punched down some trees, and crafted some pickaxes, and mined, and when I found those diamonds, the one thought that went through my mind was this is good. But you see, when God created us, he said the same thing. 6 times, God says, this is good. And on the 7th time, when he made us, he said that this was very good. And after God finished his work of creation, he rested. He wasn't tired, but rather he rested because he was ultimately satisfied and completely content with what he had done. Aladdin wants to be a prince. He wants to finally stop chasing his self-worth. He wants to be content and self-sufficient. He too wants to find that ultimately satisfying place of rest. Aladdin's second wish, and the second point that I'd like to make tonight, is that we need to be saved. Saved from what, you ask? Well, saved from ourselves. Once Aladdin becomes a prince, he parades into the palace with the genie, and the whole procession looks incredible. It's a spectacular display of colour and music and dancing filled with exotic animals and riches. From a distance, Prince Ali, or Aladdin, looks impressive. But once he has to talk with the Sultan, things start falling apart. Eventually, he can't keep it all together, and he's thrown into the ocean and uses his second wish to save himself. Now, the genie had done an incredible job at turning Aladdin into a prince. And Aladdin's plan didn't fall to pieces because the genie had failed to deliver. No, it was actually Aladdin himself who let things slip through his fingers. Even though Aladdin had been turned into a prince, he felt insecure and awkward about who he had become. This feeling is actually experienced by people all over the world, including some of the most famous and self-sufficient people on the planet. It's called, rather fittingly, Imposter Syndrome. Meryl Streep, the most nominated Golden Globe actor in history, told Ken Burns in an interview that she felt insecure about her acting ability. Oscar winner Lupita Nyong'o spoke to Time Out, saying that she goes through imposter syndrome with every role. And even award-winning author and Nobel laureate Maya Angelou said this: "I've written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find me out now. I've run a game on everybody, and they're going to find me out." Here's why. At the end of the day, all of us, in some way or another, also long for that place of rest. Holidays are the most anticipated part of the year. I mean, I always catch myself looking forwards to the end of semester when I can finally stop thinking about exams. But what really makes us tired and heavy and weary and burdened, it's not the physical work per se. So many of my friends tell me that they love learning but hate exams, or that they love training but hate competing. So our problem isn't physically doing the work, because that work comes to an end during weekends and holidays. It's the absence of a much deeper rest, proper, wonderful rest filled with contentment that we sometimes experience just a little bit when we eat KFC or play Minecraft. Earlier, I talked about some internal work that also comes into play when we go about our lives, but what is that? What's the thing beneath the physical work that makes us so burdened? It's this. It's our pride that makes us strive to be better than the rest. I want to be someone special. I want to be valued. I want to be enough. Aladdin wants to be a prince. Rocky doesn't want to be a bum. I mean, every human being does it. Some people say, if I'm doing all these really good and great things, God will bless me. And if we don't believe in God, we operate on the same level. We set a standard for ourselves and say, well, this is where I want to be, and this is the person I want to become, and that's what I'm going to work towards. The author of the Chronicles of Narnia, C.S. Lewis, writes about pride in his book, Mere Christianity, and in it he says, there is one vice of which no man in the world is free, and the more we have it ourselves, the more we dislike it in others. Pride is competitive by its very nature. It's the comparison that makes you proud, the pleasure of being above the rest. But there's something almost heroic or romantic about chasing our self-worth like this, right? In The Lord of the Rings, Frodo Baggins tries to carry the one ring all by himself, rather than letting other people help him out. In The Lion King, before he runs away, Simba just can't wait to be king. And in Star Wars, Luke Skywalker ignores Master Yoda's advice because he believes he knows better. But that kind of work is never finished. We can never sit down and say, that's good. Maybe occasionally, maybe sometimes, but we will always chase after more. The point is, we can't ever be enough for ourselves. The great preacher Charles Spurgeon once said, Alexander the Great, with all the world at his feet, cries for another world to conquer. We will never reach that place where we can look at ourselves and say that we have finally made it. Yeah, I said earlier, holidays and weekends can give us rest from our physical work, but they can never give us rest from this inner work. The only way that we can finally stop is when we're absolutely satisfied with what we're doing. In essence, I can't stop trying to be enough until I'm absolutely satisfied that I am enough. And if I can't stop trying, then it means that I've become a slave to whatever's driving me. I become a slave to my own insecurities or cultural expectations or personal ambitions. And slaves don't get days off. You see, Aladdin chases after his self-sufficiency and its promises. He wants to be a prince and believes that only then he will be enough. But instead, Aladdin is confronted with the reality that, like all of us, when we take away the title and the riches and the music, he's vulnerable and weak and needs to be saved. He needs to find rest from his pride so that he can finally stop, so that he can finally sit back and say that this is good. Realizing our own need for this rest can be really hard to admit in a society that prizes work and ambition so highly. Our pride does get in the way, but I sincerely believe that admitting this truth to ourselves moves us closer towards the solution. I want to be liberated from my work so that my work doesn't define me. I want to be liberated so that how expert I become, how good I look in other people's eyes doesn't define me. But what's our solution? How can we be free? How can we look at our life and our work and say that this is good? This is how. At last we reach the third and final wish, and Aladdin uses it for freedom, but for the genie, not for himself. As we've explored, self-sufficiency promises us the freedom, but it never delivers. It promises us that when we finally reach the standard that we think is enough, we'll be free to rest from our work. It promises us that when we reach that standard, we'll be free to no longer depend on others. But self-sufficiency can't give us any of those things. In the Gospel of Matthew, in the Bible, while Jesus is preaching in the towns of Galilee about who he is and what he has come to do, he suddenly stops and says something absolutely astonishing. He says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." What's he saying? What Jesus is saying is that we're all trying to serve something, and that inner work, that pesky pride of ours, makes us weary and burdened. Jesus invites all of us who feel this way to come to him. You see, all of us are trying to get an identity out of something, but he says that only when we make him the meaning of our life, only when we come to him, will we find that deep, fulfilling rest for our souls. Only then can we look at our lives and our work and our efforts and say that it is finished. It's not just Jesus who talks about this beautiful rest either. In the book of Hebrews in the Bible, the writer is talking about what it means to believe in Jesus, and he suddenly stops to say that there remains a rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works. Here's the big part. Just as God did from his. Now this is an amazing, beautiful statement. When God finished his work of creation and saw that it was very good, when God was absolutely satisfied in the world that he had created, that's the kind of rest that Jesus promises us. It is good. All the work, all of that inner work that needs to be done, it is finished. See what great joy that brings? But how is that possible? Here's how it's possible. How is it possible through Jesus? Here's how. When Jesus was hanging on the cross, he was in a state of absolute restlessness. And when he died on the cross, his last words were, "It is finished." Why did he say that? Why did he go through all of that? Paul, in his letter to the Colossians, tells us why. He says, "Once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior. But now, he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation." In other words, Jesus lived a life that we all should have lived, and he lived it perfectly. He died a death that all of us deserved, the penalty for our sin and shortcomings, perfectly. And now what does it mean to come to Jesus? What does it mean to make him our saviour? When the writer of the Hebrews talks about that there remains a rest for the people of God, what does he mean? No, the real question is, what does it mean to be a Christian? It means that we come to him and say, "I don't rest on my works, but I rest on yours. I'm not accepted because of what I've done, but because of what you've done. Not my track record, but your track record." And the moment that happens, God takes every shortcoming from your life, places it on Jesus, and says that it is finished. That's what the verse from Colossians means. That's what Christians mean when they talk about the gospel, the good news. And it is good news. When we come to Jesus and let him take our burdens, the only set of eyes in all of creation that we should be trying to please now looks at us and says, "It is finished." Let that fill you with great joy and great satisfaction and great rest. It is finished. Thank you.